Before the success stories, the progress, there was you. You who made a choice to grow, to inspire, to overcome your own challenges. At NASM, we're in service of your limitless potential because when you keep growing, we all get stronger. And we'll never stop making your journey our mission. Join the fitness leader. Become a fitness leader. Become a certified personal trainer.
You're listening to the NASM-CPT Podcast with Rick Richey, winner of the Share Care Emmy Award for Social Storytelling and the official podcast of the National Academy of Sports Medicine.
And welcome to the NASM-CPT Podcast. My name is Rick Richey, and today I'm going to share with you a little story about some boo-boos that have happened, a little shoulder injury. So let me tell you the story, and I get it a lot because a lot of people know that I've been training jiu-jitsu for a couple of years now, and so when I tell them that my shoulder hurt, and I tell people at jiu-jitsu in particular, like, oh, I haven't been in a while, my shoulder hurts, they're like, oh no, what happened? So here's what happened, and it wasn't in jiu-jitsu, it was at the gym. And so here's the story. I don't do barbell bench press. I don't do it because for whatever reason, when I do barbells, not dumbbell, when I do barbell, dumbbells are fine. If I do bench press with a barbell, it hurts my shoulder. And so for years, I haven't done barbell bench press. And for years, my shoulder has felt pretty good. And so instead of thinking about my shoulder feeling pretty good about doing the bench press, I'm thinking, man, for the last, 8 years or so, my shoulders felt really good. Maybe I can start incorporating barbell bench press back into it. And so I do this really well. Now, there are lots of parts of this story that I don't do well at all. And this is primarily the recovery stuff that I should probably be doing that I haven't done, and I'll explain it. But what I did here, I thought was pretty good. Let's just start with the bar. A 45-pound bar, doing bench press, felt fine, delightful. Let's go up, but not up by a lot. So I put 10-pound plates on each side. I'm now doing 65 pounds. It felt fine. Take the 10s off, put 25s on, 95 pounds. All right, let's do another 10. It feels fine. Put those 10s back on, 35s on each side. I'm coming in at a whopping 115 pounds, and I go and I do my 7, 8. I'm like, oh, that didn't feel right, number 9. Oh, dang you, number 9. And I rack the bar instead of trying to force a 10th one. So the first time my shoulder felt a little funky, I did exactly what I should have done, especially knowing my history with doing barbell bench press. I put the bar down, and instead of taking a break or lightening the weight and doing another set, I just unloaded the bar, and I was like, great, that is enough for today. And that has been enough to keep me in trouble for the past 13 and a half weeks. Since I've had my injury, and I am getting so much better. I can lift my arm over my head and it doesn't hurt until I get all the way back into the closed pack position. But what I did, happened on a Thursday. I said, let me just give it to the weekend. We'll see the weekend. Man, it was just hard to sleep. Little things I'd roll over. I push myself to roll over and I get this sharp pain, just pain in the shoulder. So by Monday or Tuesday, I was like, all right, this is definitely, I need to reach out to my physical therapist. So I reached out to Pete at Dynamic Sports Physical Therapy, Peter Schultz, who I've been my physical therapist from the beginning, when I moved to New York City and started working as a personal trainer. So as long as I've been a personal trainer, Pete has been my physical therapist, and he's amazing. And so I go to see him. I can't get in that week, so it's the week after where I can get in to see him. And just like a couple of little prodding things, he pokes a little bit here, and he goes, all right, you seem to be super sensitive with your biceps tendon. The biceps tendon. So let's talk about this for a moment. The biceps, you have two tendons. One of those tendons both cross over the shoulder joint, but one kind of veers medially and attaches to the coracoid process of the scapula. And the other one goes into the subacromial space in the scapula. And so what that one is that is the long head of the biceps. And that tendon right there, some people refer to it as the fifth muscle in the rotator cuff. Now, I know that there are 4 muscles in the rotator cuff and that a biceps tendon is not a muscle. I understand it, but it's said because it plays such a huge and pivotal role in stabilizing the shoulder joint, keeping the humeral head inside of that glenoid fossa. Every time I say fossa, I also want to say, Luke, I am your fossa, or Mufasa. Say it again. I don't know why. Those are the things that go through my head every time. So I've got this biceps tendinitis or tendinosis. It pokes on it. It hurts. I'm like, could you stop poking? And that's another thing. Physical therapists have to sometimes do something that hurts to find out what hurts. And then he goes over and then he goes to one of the rotator cuff muscles, the one that if you get a rotator cuff muscle injury, it's probably this one. On the count of 3, we say it together. 1, 2, 3. Did you say supraspinatus? Well, if you didn't, that's the one that's most likely me. And that's the most injured rotator cuff muscle that people have. Doesn't mean that the other rotator cuff muscles don't get injured. It's just supraspinatus tends to get injured more because it gets pinched in between the humeral head and the subacromial, the bottom part of the acromion. So it goes in between that subacromial space, and it can get pinched between the head of the humerus and the subacromion area. And so it pinches it, and when you got weight on there, it can do additional pinching and fraying and tearing. So it's likely a tear, but he says this to me. He says it's likely a tear, maybe a re-tear of your rotator cuff, which you tore a long time ago, and it probably has nothing to do with your rotator cuff. I don't know if you remember when you first came to see me, you came to see me because you had some scapular dyskinesis, and that ended up leading to the rotator cuff problems. And I was stunned. I went to see Pete probably 22, 23. I've been training for 23 years, 23, maybe 22. It was a year before I got a chance to know him and work with him. Why do you remember that? That's just, it was amazing. But the story was that I would take it off my shirt at the gym in the kind of trainer's changing room. I took my shirt off, and when arms went overhead, and when I put my arms down, my buddy Simon Lawson, who was in the room, he was like, dude, that's crazy. Your scapula, your shoulder blades just fell down. And I was like, what? He was like, no, put your arms over your head, put your arms down. And when I put my arms down, instead of slowly going from upward rotation to downward rotation, I went into slow upward rotation. When I put my arms down, my scapula just dropped and kind of clapped into each other into downward rotation. So I have the ability to go into upward rotation, but I did not have the ability to decelerate downward rotation of the scapula. So it just kind of snapped into downward rotation. Well, that could be a big problem as to what's wrong with my shoulder. So we did a lot of work there. And, I remember doing this work on the serratus anterior muscle, and him trying to get me to activate my serratus muscle where I could feel it. It was like telling somebody that just had their fingers removed to bend their finger. Like, I had no connection whatsoever to that muscle. There was nothing. There was like the muscle was removed from my body. And it was so frustrating to try to do what he was saying and feel what he was asking me to feel, because it was like nothing was there. And for years, I've been working on it, getting that muscle to work and engage, but I don't do barbell bench press until I did. And it taught me real quick that I will never do barbell bench press again in my life, because there's no need to. I can do dumbbells, I can do cables, I can do all of these other things. It has zero effect on me. Why the barbell? I don't know. There's a lot of talk about it with, not being able to move my arms that allows my scapula to move well. But he believes, right, it was probably a scapular issue like it was before, where my scapula aren't moving well, which led to a potential tear. Now, I went to physical therapy for several weeks. And of course, I'm like, well, most of the stuff I can do on my own as a massage therapist. I can self-release. Most of them as somebody who does exercise. I take the exercises. I understand we're going to do scapular stabilization exercises, isolated activation exercises, scapular movement exercises, all of these, which are wonderful as part of the repertoire. So I stopped going to physical therapy, but I didn't do one thing that he really wanted me to do, which wasn't necessarily make sure you keep coming to see me, but it was maybe you want to go get some imaging. Now, I did what I would say the vast majority of you probably do, which is, that'll be all right. It'll be all right. It'll be all right. I've heard it before. I just heard it again. But also, I think, like, it's functional. It hurts, but it's functional. Where I said to self, even if we find out it's torn, what does that change in my course of action? And so I am the stubborn patient to my physical therapist, just like your clients are the stubborn clients to your suggestions that maybe they go get injury, they imaging for an injury that they have. Maybe they go see a physical therapist. Maybe they go see a physician. And it is just dumbfounding, the amount of people who don't listen to us. And then all of a sudden, here I am not listening to myself. And it's all rationalization, right? Rationalize why not to go to a doctor, why not to see. And then ultimately, where if I'm not going to have surgery, my end result is what? Go to physical therapy. So here we are chasing our tail, but I do want to share some things with you that doing some work on my shoulder, because I think there are a couple of things that bother it. And if you don't know, let's talk about this. We talked about the biceps tendon, but let's talk about the supraspinatus, which is what is likely certainly injured, but whether or not it's torn, what's the degree of tear? It's not completely detached. It works, it functions, because I can initiate abduction with my shoulder. And so here we are. Let's look at the supraspinatus is the muscle that initiates shoulder abduction. If you're standing there in the frontal plane, you start to lift your arms out to the side. The supraspinatus initiates it, and then your deltoid takes over and continues the lift. Now, if you try to initiate abduction and you can't, or you do a nice shrug and kind of swing your arm out to the side, so it's like I got to bypass my supraspinatus so that the deltoid can catch it and lift it, then that's a very clear indication. That's a far more serious issue, where I'd like to think that if that were going on and I couldn't lift my arm without shrugging and swinging out to the side, that I would get some imaging. Now, this is not everybody's case looks like this, but I lift my arm to about shoulder height, but as soon as I start going into upward rotation in the scapula, I would feel pain, but I could work through it. Some of the ways that we work through it is trying to address the muscles that do downward rotation of the scapula and doing some inhibition on that. So I might do some foam rolling on my pec minor, which is a downward rotator of the scapula, which means if I'm going to put my arm over my head, I need to upward rotate my scapula. So it's the downward rotators. If they're tight, they're saying, I don't really care for upward rotation. I'd like for you to stop that. And then my shoulder gets pinched because my shoulder abduction continues without upward rotation. And there it is, pinching that muscle that is between the the acromion process and the head of the humerus. So release, do some type of manual thing, whether or not it's like some kind of roller ball or something like that, that's going to inhibit the pectoralis minor. And there are a couple other downward rotators of the scapula that we'll address. Another one is called the levator scapula. The levator scapula is on the superior medial border of the scapula. It tends to be the muscle that bothers people more than the upper traps. We always say, oh, my upper traps are killing me. And then you go to that one spot where the levator scapula connects onto the scapula. And it's like, oh, ow, ow. And that tends to be the part that's sensitive. It's usually the levator scapula that becomes far more problematic than the upper traps in many people. And then we also have the rhomboids. So the rhomboids are downward rotators of the scapula. And I'd even say that the lats are downward rotators of the scapula because they are. But they also are shoulder adductors, they're shoulder extenders. So if I'm going into abduction or shoulder flexion, the lats not only can limit my shoulder going up, but they limit upward rotation. So you go through and do some type of inhibitory technique on those four muscles, and then my arm goes overhead. Hardly a pinch at all. If I do it right now, which has been 13 and a half weeks, I don't feel a pinch at all, not even a little bit. And I kind of have to get all the way up into that closed pack position before I feel the pinching anyway. But then bringing the arm back down, putting it behind my back, almost like you're going to be arrested. Yeah, you do know the position. And then see if I can put my hand behind my back and then lift it off of the back of my lower back. And that's a significant amount of internal rotation. So I'm now practicing movement of my scapula. And I like to do the inhibitory techniques, do some movement, and then do some stabilization and isolated strengthening. So isolated strengthening, those same things like you would do the lateral rotations, external rotations, standing or lying down on your side with a dumbbell and just doing the cable or the weight across your body. Then you can also do it with your arms out to the side, like, freeze, don't shoot. Why is everything like talking to the police right now? Arms up, don't shoot, where your arms are out to the side. You can do external rotations from there. And those are strengthening exercises for the teres minor and the infraspinatus. And the thing about those two muscles is based on their angle, they actually can depress the humeral head, which means keep it from pressing up, depressing versus elevating up and pinching the supraspinatus more. It can pull down on the humeral head and create more space. So part of that stabilization is not just to stabilize, but it's also to actually get some downward pull for something that might have this kind of anterior superior migration of the humeral head, that it can pull it back and down a little bit. Great. So I love this concept already. But then maybe the most important component as I'm working on trying to help my shoulder in this process of healing is creating stability. Creating stability where I might do something as simple as a side plank from my knees. A side plank from the knees where I'm not trying to get up high. I'm not trying to create a long lever. I'm not trying to make this hard. All I'm trying to do is get it to work enough that the muscles around my shoulder joint activate. They stabilize, and those kind of exercises can minimize the number of sharp pinches that I get, because it's those sharp pinches that continue to accelerate that inflammatory process that we want to stay away from, because it's the inflammation that hurts. The tear doesn't even hurt as much as the inflammation hurts. And then we work through this process. Now, I'm not saying, y'all, that I've done the right things. Not in terms of like working on myself and going to physical therapy and doing all of this work on my own. But should I see a physician? Maybe. I am being the annoying patient that we all probably are in some way. and that every one of you have a client that is kind of like this. And they're like, just work around it. Now, if I had a client like me, I'd be like, we haven't been able to work appropriately for 13 and a half weeks. Go get it checked out. But they also probably have better insurance than I do. So that's another thing. But with that said, I think it's good to kind of talk through, the issues that we have with our own workouts. I took time off. That's another thing, like making sure that I'm taking time off from doing things that could potentially really hurt this shoulder that's already injured. I don't want to do that. So I haven't really been going to jujitsu. It's been hard for me to do upper body exercises. But with that being said, my leg workouts have totally been crushing it. I hope that this helps you better understand a little bit about what goes in the shoulder, and certainly within my shoulder, have a better idea of what that injury looks like with the supraspinatus and the biceps tendonitis. And then maybe you can all be more responsible than me and go get it checked out. I think the most important thing is I did go to my physical therapist. I went to see him for several weeks in a row, and now I've just taken over and doing all of my homework, all the work that he's given. So for that, Pete, thank you. I'm coming back to see you. Don't worry. For those that are listening, thank you so much for being here. Like, subscribe, share with your fitness friends and family. And if you want to reach out to me, you can do so. Hit me up on Instagram. You can find me at dr.rickrichey or email me rick.richey@nasm.org. Y'all, thanks for listening. Keep inspiring people to fitness. This has been the NASM CPT Podcast.